Hey, Treasure History. Today's essential question is, who were the Nubians? Please pause your video and copy the essential question in your notebook. Please draw your vertical line for your notes and draw your two boxes for your points. Yesterday we learned about the form of writing used by Egyptians. Do you remember the difference between cuneiform and hieroglyphics? Today we're going to move on to talking about a great African kingdom, a neighbor of Egypt to the south. This neighbor is known as the Kingdom of Kush. Kush is also called Nubia, so when you hear Kush and Nubia, know that they are the exact same place. Today, the country where Kush was located is now called Sudan. So here's Kush or Nubia, this is Egypt. See how it's right to the south? And today, again, right south of Egypt is called Sudan. You may have heard Sudan in the news. If you have internet at home, you should Google Sudan to find out what happens there now. The African kingdom of Nubia was located to the south of Egypt, closer to where the Nile River started. In this area, there was plenty of fertile soil and plenty of rainfall. Kush was known for being a society that herded cattle. The cow was a really important animal to the Nubians, and they did agriculture and herded the cows. Go ahead and copy the central idea. Nubia, this is a great African kingdom. It's Egypt's neighbor to the south, and it's known as the land of gold. Because they were major trading partners, Egypt and Nubia shared a lot of similar culture, especially when it came to religion. Both societies called their rulers pharaohs, and their pharaohs dressed the same way. See the pharaoh hat. Both societies believed that their pharaohs were gods that were sent to earth. But in Nubia, it was actually more common for the rulers to be queens instead of kings. That's right, ladies. Nubia was a culture in which women had a lot of power. Aside from their pharaohs being similar, Nubians and Egyptians also believed in most of the same gods, although Nubians added some gods that Egyptians didn't have, such as this lion god. A cultural difference between the two places was that Nubian people, more than Egyptians, prided themselves in being very welcoming and kind to strangers. And it was normal for people that you didn't know very well to stay for up to 10 days in your home. Nubians did not feel that Egyptians were so kind and welcoming. But as you can see, the cultural differences were distinct or different enough to make this a very separate kingdom from Egypt. Nubia is remembered today as a very African kingdom, whereas Egypt is more connected with the Middle East. So remember that Mesopotamia and the Middle East is right up here on the other side of the Red Sea. And Nubia is certainly more African. These days when you hear Nubia, a lot of people associate that with just true African culture. Still, the reason that they were so similar the way that they were was because they had a lot of cultural diffusion. Why do you think there was so much cultural diffusion between Egypt and Nubia? That's right. Egypt and Kush, or Nubia, were the closest of trading partners because they were able to travel to one another on the Nile River. Do you remember what Egypt mainly wanted from Kush? That's right. Gold. And Nubia, remember, is a word that means land of gold, which was very plentiful in the area. And once it became part of Nubian culture to value gold so much, Nubians became hungry for more of it, and they started a trade route across the vast, dry Sahara Desert. We know that that's a super hard trade route because it crosses such a large desert all the way across Africa. So here's Nubia. They had to cross all the way to the other side of Africa to find the gold. But they did it because there was plenty of gold in this area of Africa. But besides trade, Egypt and Nubia had close relationships in other ways. Young Nubians went to study in Egypt. So So here's an Egyptian school with some Nubian students there. And then they brought back Egyptian customs to their homes in Nubia. For example, this is Nubia, and these are pyramids. They don't look quite the same as Egyptian pyramids, but there are pyramids in Nubia too. Nubians and Egyptians became friends with each other when they traveled, and sometimes they even married one another. But because Egypt and Kush were so gold hungry, they also fought over control of this valuable land. At first, Egypt was more militarily powerful than Kush. During the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, Pharaoh Senusret, who is known as an Egyptian pharaoh who was very warlike and conquered a lot of places, he conquered most of northern Nubia and ruled it as if it was part of Egypt. That's why even still today there are Egyptian statues like this located in Nubia. But over time, Nubia became more powerful, and during a time of weakness for Egypt, Nubia actually conquered Egypt right back. Nubia ruled Egypt for about a century, or about 100 years. So cultural diffusion can happen not just from trade, but also when civilizations are conquered. When the pharaohs from Egypt ruled Nubia, Egyptian culture spread to Nubian people. This is when the pyramids were built in Nubia. Nubian art looked like Egyptian art, and Egyptian gods were highly praised. Here's a picture of Nubians praising an Egyptian pharaoh. But when Nubian pharaohs ruled Egypt, of course, Nubian culture also spread to Egypt. So here's a picture of Nubians in traditional Nubian clothing who are in Egypt. So all in all, cultural diffusion happened between Egypt and Nubia because of trade, military conquering, and close relationships like friendships and marriage between the people of the two cultures. Please pause your video and write a summary of at least 3 complete sentences. Please explain in your own words why the Nubians and Egyptians had such similar cultures. All right, if you're hearing this, that means you should be done with your summary. If you're not done, pause and finish. You need 3 sentences. Check that you have periods at the end of each sentence. If you're finished, remember you're going to be writing your EduCanon score right here, and you're keeping track of your at-bats during practice right here. Remember, the cows are super important in Nubia. This cow says, "Moo, go back to your playlist for practice."